Thank you guys for being here this morning. It's good to see you. This past weekend, some of you guys know I did this crazy thing on a Saturday. I participated in a 50K ruck. So what it involves is wearing a backpack with 30 pounds of weight plus any kind of food and water to last you the several hours, which it took me 8 to do this event. If you're doing the math, 50K is just over 31 miles. And it's not something you just get up one day and decide to do, right? I didn't just get up last Saturday morning and go, I'm going to go walk for 31 miles. It was stupid enough planning for it, let alone, right, not planning for it. It involved a lot of things leading up to it. For months leading up to it, I was going out on rucks with some other guys. I was doing short rucks, I was doing long rucks, I was doing fast ones, I was doing slow ones. I'd put extra weight on. So sometimes I was wearing 50 pounds, sometimes I was wearing 35 pounds. One day I went out and did a long ruck, and so went out for 4 hours one day. I got up early many mornings. There was a series of mornings where I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go get 8 miles in before work. Right? All these things that I did to prepare. And then leading up to it the week before, I was trying to drink as much water and fluids as I could to try to store up that hydration because I knew I would need it. As you can imagine, there are days that I wake up at 4 o'clock and I did not want to get up at all, right? It's like, okay, that's really early. It's even early for me. 4 o'clock is even early for me. So in all those times, I had a choice. I could have said, you know what? I'm not going to get up. I'm going to stay in bed. And some of those days I was going out by myself, which was even easier to say, you know what? I think I'm just going to sleep in today, not worry about it. But I didn't. I got up and I went and I put in the work. Because of that, I was able to complete my goal, right? So all up to that, there wasn't anybody that was making me do anything. They weren't making me train. They weren't making me drink water, right? It was all things I had to do on my own, and I had to make a choice. And what was pushing me was this goal. I had to put a goal to do this. I know you're thinking, why did you have a goal to do that? Don't ask those kind of questions, but just know there was this goal out there that was pushing me to do this. And so not only that, I also had a goal to be the fastest person over 50 to complete it. And so those goals kept me focused on my training and my discipline and doing things I didn't want to do and giving up things that were comfortable, like the bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm telling you this because it ties into what we're going to talk about today. Right? What's funny is I was out there last week walking this and going, I know why I do things like this, because God's going to use them for sermon illustrations, right? Pastors do stupid things so you can use it as illustration in a sermon. But as I was thinking about this is not unfamiliar to the metaphor that Paul uses that we're going to look at today around training, around having a goal, being purposeful and intentional around what you're going to do. And so the big idea we're going to look at this morning is when the gospel drives us, it changes the way we live our lives and what we're willing to give up and what we pursue. And so if you have your scripture with you today, open up to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and we are going to read from 19 through 27. When you've got that found, please stand with us as we read God's holy word. Starting with verse 19, it says, For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win the Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Thank you. You may be seated. So, before we dive into the passage, I want to again give context. I know I talk about this every week, but it's important when we read Scripture that we understand what's going on. And so, this passage is actually in the middle of a response Paul is making. So, if you remember right, Paul is addressing issues in the church, right, at Corinth. He's calling them out on some things, but he's also responding to some questions they've asked him around certain beliefs or ways they're conducting themselves. And specifically, this is in this response section that we started a few weeks ago where they were asking about food offered to idols. So this is actually part of this argument, which is, you're like, it doesn't even talk about that. I get it, but this is what happened is they were asking a question, and he wasn't just answering the question, he was answering a question and addressing an issue. Because even in their question, they revealed they had an issue. And really what it gets down to is they were asking about food offered to idols because they wanted to claim their rights, right? I want to eat this food offered to idols. All this, we talked about it before, right? They said, hey, idols aren't real, so it's really not being offered to anything. Why should I not be able to eat it? And so they were more concerned about getting what they thought they deserved and what was their right than anything else. And so Paul is addressing the under root of this question, not just the question. He does address the question, but he also addresses this underpinning problem of I want my rights, regardless of how it impacts anybody else, right? And so he gets to this point where he's addressing specifically why give up our rights? Why is it important to be willing to give up our rights? And so that's what's going on here, and that's where we're starting in this section of passage. We see that what they were wanting to do is exactly opposite of what the Bible teaches us, right? We aren't saved just to claim our rights. We're saved for a purpose. We're saved because of something. There's something that should motivate us, and it's the gospel. We're going to talk about, as we continue in the series, faith that grows us is driven by the gospel, right? That faith is driven and motivated by the gospel. And so we're going to look at this gospel motivation that not our rights, not our pleasures, not our life goals, those aren't things that motivate us. They shouldn't be the motivations for our lives as believers. It should be the gospel. And so as we look at this, gospel motivation drives us to one, self-denial. So we're gonna look at this in verses 19 through 23 in this idea that he's saying, I deny myself my rights in order to reach more people. Look at this. He says, for though I am free from all. So what's he free from? Why is he talking about this? Again, we need to look at it in context, what he's been talking about. And he's actually been talking about the fact that right before this is what Pastor Jason preached on last week is he had given up his right to be paid for preaching the gospel. He says it's a right. We should be able to be paid for preaching the gospel, right? This is a good thing. God says, pay your pastors, pay those that preach the gospel, take care of them, make sure they're taken care of. And he's given up this right, and he's supporting himself, and he says, I can boast in this, but he's also saying, I'm free. I don't owe anything to anybody. There's no man that I owe anything to. I don't have to say a certain thing because they're the ones paying my salary, right? You see this sometimes in churches where a church will tell a pastor, you can't preach on that because we're paying your salary. And he's saying, I'm free from all that. I don't have to worry about that. I'm free from that. I can be who God has called me to be, which is a good thing. But he also says, I don't have to, I'm not indebted to the Jews. I'm not indebted to the Gentiles. And so I'm free. But does he take that freedom and just use it for his will? Does Paul do that? What does he say here? He says, for though I am free from all, he says, I have made myself a servant to all. He's free. He has no indebtedness. He says, regardless of all those things, I have willingly chosen to make myself a servant to all. It's a big statement. Basically saying is my life is not about me. My life is about everybody else because of the gospel. And so he goes on then to describe how he does this, right? He says, to the Jews, I have become a Jew, become as a Jew. And you're like, well, isn't he Jewish? He is Jewish, right? He's a Jew of Jews. We can go back and look at his pedigree and his resume. What he's saying, though, is he is not bound by those Jewish traditions and those Jewish laws and all those things, right? Because he's been saved and he's been set free. He's not bound by all those things, but guess what he does when he's working with Jews? He observes Jewish laws. When he's meeting with Jews and talking to them, I would imagine he's eating kosher. He's not going out and eating Gentile food and unkosher food. He's like, when I'm meeting with Jews and talking with Jews, I'm going to eat kosher. When I'm meeting with Jews, I'm going to observe their Sabbath, right? He does these things. We see, we know Paul's view on circumcision, right? Because we can look at other letters where there was the Jewish believers that have gotten saved and are trying to make Gentiles all get circumcised. And Paul's like, stop it. Circumcision is not required. But what does he do with Timothy? In Acts chapter 16, he says, Timothy, who was half Jew, half Greek, his dad was Greek, his mom was Jewish, was going to be joining him on mission to Jewish people. And so what did he do? He said, Timothy, I need you to get circumcised. So as not to be an offense. Here I already said that you don't have to. There's nothing requiring you to get circumcised. But we see that in order to reach people, he was willing to set aside those rights, or have Timothy set aside his rights. Timothy got the short end of that stick, right? He had to give up his rights to go and minister to the Jewish people. And so we see that he's willing to do that. Not only just Jews, he says to those that are under the law, I'm willing to place myself under the law. This could have been, there's some debate on, Jews and laws, the same thing. Well, there's probably Jews that aren't under the law because they don't practice, but they still may observe Jewish traditions. There's probably some Gentiles that are under the law because they became Jewish in their practices, right? So you get the point here is he's covering all these areas. So he did the same thing with those under the law. He does the same thing with those that are outside the law. He does the same thing with the weak. He is willing to set aside his rights and accommodate them and their practices and their traditions and their beliefs, right? As long as it doesn't contradict Scripture. We can make that. We can make sure that that's clear. Is Paul is not saying, I'll just do anything. Like he's not going to give up doctrine. He's not going to give up biblical truth. But if anything that's not biblically sound, that he is not grounded in truth, I'm just saying that the right way. I'm getting there. But if it's not required by Scripture, he's willing to give it up. Because it's important enough to reach the lost, to reach those people. Let me use this example. I'll step away from Paul in Corinth and use something from Christian history. We talked about a few weeks ago, actually, someone else that went to the China Inland Mission. It was a female that gave up some things and went on mission trip to China back in the 1800s. China Inland Mission was founded by a British man named Hudson Taylor. So Hudson Taylor lived from 1832 to 1905, and when he was 21, he felt called into missions. And he leaves Britain and travels to China and begins to share the gospel with the Chinese people there. And he does it just like everybody else is doing it. He's dressed like a Westerner. He speaks like a Westerner. In fact, all the missionaries live together, right? And he's there for a year or two and realizing that there's not any progress being made. These Chinese people are not coming to know the Lord. They're not trusting of the Westerners. And so he gets convicted and he's like, this isn't working. I need to do something different. And so what does he do? He starts dressing like the Chinese men. He dons a hairstyle like the Chinese. And I'll tell you, this hairstyle is one where they shave all of their head except for what's back here, and they never cut the back of their hair. And so it grows out, and they braid it really long. Interestingly enough, that wasn't just a style choice from the Chinese. They were made to do it. It was a law because they were conquered by a neighboring nation of people, And they made them do this, and if they didn't do it, they could be killed. And so the Chinese men wore this hairstyle as a act of submission to the emperor that was now ruling China. And so Hudson Taylor stepped into that and did that as well. And then he moved away from all the other missionaries and moved in to the area where all the Chinese people lived and lived with them, right? He gave up the comforts that he experienced, the things he was used to, a nice hairstyle, right? Right? He was willing to give all that up and accommodate the people he was trying to reach. And what's amazing is that started a change in our missionaries from then on. Our missionaries do that today. They do this today. They when they go somewhere, they give up the Western comforts. They give up those things, and they live among the people they're trying to reach. I was listening to a story about this week, and there was a young lady who was a missionary in Southeast Asia. And this is just a little thing, but she was asked, like, what do you do that you wish you had that was from America that you wish you had that you don't do there? And as you can imagine, Southeast Asia is very hot. It's very humid. It's probably, for us, would be very miserable. They do have air conditioning, but they get this. They don't believe you should run your air conditioning if nobody's in the house or in the room. And so they turn their air conditioners off. And so when you can imagine, if you've been gone for a long day, what it's like when you walk into that room, right? And then the air conditioner has to catch up and work. Instead of saying, no, that's uncomfortable for me, I'm going to run my air conditioner, she leaves it off just like everybody else because she does not want to offend them, and she wants to earn their trust so that she can be able to share the gospel with them. That's what Paul is doing, right? It's about being willing to do those things. What does that look like in churches? Sometimes it's not being so stickler about the music that you want to listen to, right? If your church is actively meeting needs and reaching people, and it's doing good, and you don't like the music, are you willing to give up your style of music to accommodate the people that you're reaching? Is it the attire? All right, here I'm wearing jeans at this church, but if I was going to go to another church that was offensive to most people, I should be willing to wear a tie and a suit, right? Because it's not about me. It's about the gospel. It's about the message. It's about accommodating other people's preferences, not my own. For us living in our world today, I thought of a few examples of how this might look at work. Let's say there's somebody in the office that God has laid on your heart and you're praying for them and you're trying to build a bridge with them. But you being a good American football fan, the real football, and they like soccer. Are you willing to go, you know what? I personally think soccer is, I don't know, it's boring, and they fake falling, like fake hurting themselves all the time, all these things. Are you willing to go, I'm going to go enjoy something they enjoy and go watch soccer even though you don't like it? That's a silly example, right? But are you willing to do those things? Let's think about this. Let's say the guy who finished first in our 50K is like a super, super, super clean eater. Like, he doesn't eat anything that's not fully organic. He doesn't put any processed sugars in his body, whatever. If I was trying to reach him, he's a believer. So, but if I was trying to reach him, would I be willing to eat the way he did if I was having lunch with him? Would I be willing to go to Doc Green's? I don't like salad. And so, right, would I be willing to give up the barbecue and the burger and all those things and go, hey, do you want to go grab a salad with me? I know it sounds silly, but those are decisions we make every day. And oftentimes we're not thinking about the gospel. We're not thinking about accommodating things. We're thinking about, well, what do I want? Well, I don't really want that, so I'm not going to go to lunch today. And you're not trying to be rude. You're just like, I won't go to lunch today. But are you missing an opportunity? Are you willing to put yourself in positions where you're uncomfortable, where it's something you don't like, in order to share the gospel? I don't think we have a lot of those really drastic ones here. If you go on the mission field overseas, you're going to see a lot of them, right? The worst, it wasn't even that bad when I was in Haiti. It was eating what they served me. For those that know me, know I do not like beans. I don't like beans. Guess what their main source of protein was in Haiti? Beans. Beans was in everything. There's beans in the rice. There is beans in, at breakfast, you got eggs and rice and beans. They did have goat. I ate goat. That was good. But if you were somewhere else, it may be eating a bug or a worm, right? Are you willing to do those things to accommodate them to share the gospel? That's what Paul is doing. That's what we're asked to do, right? That's what it means by self-denial. If we're motivated by the gospel, we're willing to set aside our preferences, our likes, to accommodate someone else's. So if we're gospel driven, if we're motivated by the gospel, it's going to drive us to self-denial, but it also drives us to self-control. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives a prize, right? He goes on here to talk about this athletic metaphor. And if you didn't know, Corinth was a huge, huge athletic city. So they hosted every other year the Isthmian Games, which was second only to the Olympic Games back in ancient history. And so every other year they had all these people descend on Corinth to participate in these games. And they took them seriously. They practiced. They did all these things to run a race. They boxed. They had all these sports that they did. There's 6 major sports they did. Again, they didn't just get up one day and go, let's go run a race. They had very serious training. Oftentimes, it was 10 months leading up to it. They went into training for about 10 months, and they had to exercise self-control. They had really strict diets. They were anything they did was all about winning that race. If they were married, they abstained from sex for 10 months. They did all these things to win the race. They exhibited self-control. To tie it into something we could relate to, I thought about a runner I actually used to follow back when I was running a lot more in the early 2000s, 2008 to 2010 area. There's a young man named Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall was a strong believer, and that's kind of why I followed him. He was a runner and a believer, and I read his biography. And he was the first American to run a half marathon in under an hour, which is stupid fast, right? He detailed out in his biography how he trained and what that looked like, right? As you can imagine, he lived at altitude, so he trained up in the mountains and running, right? So he was deprived of oxygen, so he could train better. So when he got down at the race altitude, he was more efficient. His body could handle that. More oxygen actually helped him perform better. He was very strict with his diet. This is when I run so I can eat. He ate so he could win, right? There's a huge difference. He was 5'10", and he weighed 120 pounds. So think about what his diet looked like to stay that thin, so he could run. And he ran twice a day, and everything he did was about running. He'd get up and go run. He'd come back and take a 2-hour nap, and then eat was very strict diet, and then go out and run again, and then come back and eat and go to bed. And that was his life, training to win the race. And that's what Paul's talking about is when these runners run, they run to win. And that means they have to exhibit self-control. The question is do we do the same thing? If the gospel motivates us, our decisions that we make shape how we live for the gospel. Right? Do we realize that we need to exhibit self-control? Self-controlled lives allow us to maintain our testimony. They prepare us for doing the things that we need to do for the gospel. and I'm not saying this to like, hey, go try harder, be more self-controlled, because if you just go out and try to be self-controlled, you're not going to be successful, right? Because we know self-control is what, right? It's a fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 and 23, right? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? It's a gift of the Spirit. So when we have self-control, we have to be living in the power of the Spirit. When we try to muster it up, we try to do it ourselves, it's often short-lived. We can do it for a little while, and then we fall off. It's not about being better. It's about leaning into God and His ability to help us be self-controlled. Because we all have fleshly desires still, do we not? I mean, right? We're tempted all the time to do things we shouldn't do. And if we're not walking in the Spirit, we're not going to live self-controlled life. Listen to how this Proverbs 25:28, what it says about self-control. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Lacking self-control, if you're not walking in the Spirit and you're lacking self-control, you have no defenses against Satan and all the temptations that are out there. None. You're vulnerable. And Paul is saying we should be like runners running to win, exhibiting self-control, leaning into the power of the Spirit to be able to do the things that we need to do, to refrain from the things we shouldn't, right? And to live those lives that are defined by self-control. Because we have an enemy who's walking around like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. And if we're not prepared for that, we have the danger of being disqualified. Gospel motivation drives us to self-denial, to self-control, but also to self-discipline. It says, so I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air. Right? That metaphor, you think about this, is they have a purpose. These racers, these runners had a purpose. They run not aimlessly. Like I might go running aimlessly. I'm just going to go run a few miles, make sure I end up back at home. Right? They're running for a prize. They're running for a purpose. When they're boxing, they're not just boxing the air, right? They're not going to just waste they're not doing it for show. They're not just wasting their energy. They're boxing to hit something, right? There's a purpose. They're intentional. So because of that, he says, I discipline my body and keep it under control. But we're going to focus on the discipline now, this idea of being disciplined. So let's play this out a little bit, because if we're not disciplined, we have the danger of not doing the things we should do. So I think about let me just walk through this scenario, right? So let's say you're like, hey, I need to do better. I want to read my Bible more. I'm gonna start getting up 30 minutes early, so I make sure I have 30 minutes before I go to work to spend time with God, to read my Bible and pray. And you have a long day at work. Maybe you have something, you go out with your family, or you have some meetings or whatever in the evening, and you get home. Right? This is for me. This is I can do this. I have meetings. I finally get home, and I like to decompress when I get home. I don't like to just go right to bed. And so let's say you start watching something on TV, and you're like, oh, this is a really good movie. I haven't seen this movie in a long time. Oh, it's okay. I can stay up late. I'll finish the movie. And so you finish the movie, and then tomorrow morning comes around, and your alarm goes off 30 minutes before it was normally going to go off, and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't think I can get it. I'm just going to snooze one time. I snooze it one time. 9 minutes, right? Snooze is 9 minutes. 9 minutes go by, now it goes off again. You have 21 minutes. You're like, I still have time. I'm going to snooze again. Before you know it, you've snoozed 4 times, and now you're sleeping later than you would have had you not said you want to get up 30 minutes early, and you've missed your chance to read your Bible, and you're getting up out of bed in a rush, in a hurry, and you're in a bad mood, and you rush off to work, and you forget your lunch because anyway, right? It started the night before, did it not? It didn't start that morning. It wasn't about just the morning. It was about decisions we make before that, decisions we make leading up to that. And so are we self-disciplined? Do we view decisions we make as impactful or that they're no big deal, right? This is not a big deal. This decision is not important. It's not the decision, right? Whether or not I watch TV or not is not a decision that in itself seems like a big deal. But that little decision has an impact on the next day. So I'll use this example. On our 50K ruck that we did, there were several guys who did not finish. Do you think they weren't trying enough? Right? 20 miles in, can't make it any. No, they just weren't trying hard enough. Right? That's what it was. That's why they couldn't finish. Maybe they really didn't want it bad enough. You think that's right? So we get confused sometimes. We see something happen, or we're not able to do something God's asked us to do in the moment, and we're looking at what's in the moment that's preventing us. You know why those guys didn't finish? Because they didn't train. I know, because I know some of these guys. And I know the days that they slept in, and I know they didn't get up and go do the long rucks and things like that, right? It wasn't a decision. It wasn't that they didn't want it bad enough. They didn't try hard enough. It's because they weren't self-disciplined and they didn't put in the training. When you fail at what God's asked you to do, it's not because you didn't want it hard enough. I've been there. I see people that really want a vivid, strong walk with God, and they want to have that quiet time. But it's not that they didn't want it bad enough or they didn't try hard enough. They oftentimes didn't make the right decisions leading up to it. They didn't view it as, I need to be self-disciplined and intentional, not just in that moment, but in the day before and the day before, right? Does that make sense? Oftentimes we think when we mess something up, we go, I just need to try harder. Maybe you just need to be a little bit more self-disciplined. Maybe you need to be more intentional. The gospel, if it's really the gospel's motivating us, it's going to motivate us in those little decisions that lead up to those things that we really are called to do. Sometimes we just put ourselves in a bad spot and we set ourselves up for failure before we even get there because of the decisions we made. And so he's trying to paint this picture that the gospel will drive us to self-discipline even in the little decisions of life. Really, when the gospel gets a hold of your heart, you don't accidentally grow into mature. It's not like you just accidentally grow. One day I'm going to be a mature Christian. It's just going to happen. I'll go to church once a week and I'm going to grow and eventually I'm going to be this super Christian, right? Does anybody here not want to be a good Christian? Right? Going to church once a week is not going to get you there. It's not. It's not going to get you there. If you are saying the gospel is motivating me to walk with God and be a good Christian, what does that mean? It's little decisions. It's little things. It's deciding to go to bed a little bit earlier, to get up on time, to say no to something, right? To be willing to discipline yourself for the gospel. As we kind of think about wrapping up here, let me think about this for a minute, is oftentimes we don't really see what's driving us when life is going smooth, right? Life is going smooth, it's going great. We don't really think about what's motivating us, what's driving us. It's when things get tough, that's when we really get tested, we really see what's motivating us, right? Even people that are going to church on a regular basis, you're going to church on a regular basis and then life gets tough and you're like, stop going all of a sudden. And you don't go back. And all of a sudden 6 weeks is gone, 2 months is gone, 6 months is gone, and you've not been in church. I'm going to argue that it wasn't the gospel that was motivating you to be in church. You thought you were doing something good. You wanted to be there, but your motivation wasn't the gospel. The gospel is your motivation, and stuff goes bad. Guess what? You're also motivated to get up and go again, even when things aren't good. When I was on my 50K, I was on mile 25, and my blisters had blisters. I mean, I'm not joking. Literally, there was a blister on top of a blister, and it popped at mile 25. And I don't know if you've ever had a blister pop while you're walking. It was very, very, very uncomfortable. And I'm sitting there at an aid station looking at my foot thinking, I don't want to go on. I don't feel like continuing. I could have very easily said, I'm done. I'm not going to finish. There's 6 more miles. But I wasn't just motivated by, hey, I wanted to get up and go to a walk. I was motivated by the fact that Nikki was at the finish line waiting for me, right? She was going to be there to see me come across the finish line and cheer me on. There was a guy I was walking with that we were, what would happen if I stopped? Would he be like, well, maybe I need to stop. Maybe I shouldn't go any further, right? And so it was in that moment that my motivation allowed me to push through that painfulness. And I was walking really slow for a little bit. My time dropped dramatically for about a mile after that 25. But then the further I went, the better it got, the more I was able to push. I don't think it really got better, but I wasn't thinking about it as much. And I was able to push through to finish. It was during that tough time that I realized what was motivating me. It's just like life. Things are going to get rough. Things are going to get hard. Things are going to get challenged. And that's when our motivation is tested. That's when we really see what's driving us. I was just going to church because that's what I thought I was supposed to. I was just going to church because that made my wife happy. I was just going to go to church because it looked good. And then life gets rough. Guess what happens? It goes out the window. What's motivating us? Is it the gospel? Paul, in writing this, he had a goal, and that goal was to make an impact with his life for the gospel. He shaped his life so he could share it. He pursued self-control, self-discipline, in order that he would not lose his testimony, right? He says, I don't want to be, if I don't do these things, I run the temptation of being disqualified and not being able to fulfill what God's called me to do. And so he wanted others to know what he knew, that God loved them, right? That God loved them and wanted to forgive them of their sins and have a relationship with them. And that's where we have to be clear. The gospel is not just some example to follow. It's not just used here like a lot of modern day dead churches will proclaim as Jesus' life was just an example of how we should live our life. That's not what it was. Jesus was not just some example. He came to be the Savior of the world. He came as God's Son, as God, to live. When we think about gospel motivation, he denied himself all the rights he had, came and put on flesh and bone, pain, suffering, temptation, all those things that we experience that we don't like. He willingly put that on for you and for me. But like I said, he didn't just do this as an example. He did it because he loves us. He did it because he was able to step out, face all those things, live a perfect life, right? He says, I don't do anything except what I see my Father doing. He was able to live sinlessly, do what his Father asked him to do, walk the path that he was given, willingly lay down his life, and go through that suffering and that pain and being forsaken by his Father so that we could be saved, so that we could have a relationship with Christ, so that we could have an eternity in heaven someday, so we could be adopted as sons and daughters of God, so that we can have the same inheritance he has. He did that for you and me. He did that for all of us. And then on the third day, right, he rose from the dead, demonstrating that he was God and defeating sin and the grave. So that now we can look forward to that hope one day that no matter what happens to us, if we have a relationship with Christ, what does that mean? Death is not final. Sin is not final. Right? We're still going to sin. I still sin. You guys still sin. But sin is not going to have its last word. Once you've surrendered your life to Christ, no matter what, you have victory. The question is, do you live in that victory today? Does the gospel motivate you to deny yourself, to exhibit self-control and self-discipline so that you can live in that victory today. The question is what's your motivation? What's driving you in your life? Let's pray.